Okay, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming. And I thought I should let you know that we are recording this webinar with the view to making it available on our YouTube channel for other people to look at. So I'll make a bit of a start. The purpose really of today's webinar is to walk you through some of the features that are current in Office 365, and then how our various products can support those things. So hopefully most of you are familiar with Office 365 as a platform. So some of this may not be new. But again, I'll just walk you through some of the current features of Office 365, and then we can go through what our products can do. If you've got any questions at all, just feel free to drop those as an instant message down to me, and I'll be able to answer them. I'll try and pick them up as I go along. And hopefully we should be done in about 20 minutes, half an hour. I'm not expecting this to be a particularly drawn out process. So I'll start with the screen we've got open in front of us here, which is the Office 365 Admin Center. Now, as most of you will know, this is this is actually connected to Azure Active Directory, and in most cases will be synced directly from a local Active Directory, either in the school or the trust or wherever it is your users reside. In terms of Salamander Active Directory, we can actually take the users from your MIS system and provision them directly into here if that was something that was required. What we generally recommend, though, if you're using a local Active Directory and an Azure Active Directory, that you use the Microsoft Tools AAD Connect to connect the two systems together. And the two main reasons for doing that are that if you ever want to use single sign-on with ADFS from Microsoft, you need to be using their tool to get the users from your local Active Directory into Azure Active Directory, but also because it manages the password synchronization process as well, so that if you change a password locally, the password in Azure Active Directory, so in Office 365, is also updated. If we create the users with our software or any other provisioning tools, they're actually separate accounts completely, and you don't get the password synchronization. It all depends on the environment. We work with a number of schools and trusts who are running separate entities for Office 365, and they're very happy to do that, and they'd actually prefer that there are separate accounts. And so obviously we can create those users and groups for them. If I just open one of these, we can see these are all demo accounts that we use for BET this year. So there's not that many in there, but what we can see is obviously we've got licenses for these. And one of the things that Salamander Active Directory can do is provision all these licenses for you. Now, obviously, there's a number of ways of doing this. Obviously, you can do it through PowerShell and various other means. The way that Salamander Active Directory works is it knows, because we're working with data from the MIS system, we know who a student is, who a staff member is, we know what years or key stages students are in, we know whether staff are teachers or non-teachers, and we can use that information to determine what kind of licenses people get. So we're working with some schools where Key Stage 3 students get some licenses, but say don't get SharePoint or they don't get Exchange. But as soon as they hit Year 10 or Key Stage 4, then they do get those licenses created. And rather than having to try and work that out manually every time, our software knows that as soon as they start Year 10, that they get the Exchange license and will automatically turn that on for them, for instance. I mean, we can do that with any of the licenses. And then the same for staff. And as and when Office 365 gets new features such as the planner, the forms, flow, power apps, all these things were added in the past few months. We've got they're automatically generated and activated for anybody who already has that license to Office 365 for Education. But we're working with some schools who don't want to use those things yet. They're not quite ready to deploy those features to all of their students. So we can very easily turn those off en masse and very, very quickly. And then the same for licensing staff as well. We can also do exactly the same thing because we know who they are. We can manage that either by the data that's in the MIS system, or if there are groups in Office 365 or groups in Active Directory that determine what licenses people should have, we can manage it based on that information as well. The other key thing to note is the location. Every time an Office 365 user is created and they use Outlook for the first time, the first thing they're asked to do is set their time zone, set their location, which is all based around the region and language features. We've had a number of cases where students have picked something at random and ended up with data in completely the wrong time zone, etc. So we can also automate this process for you. Equally, we work with one school where there's actually more than one location in play. Because of the nature of their institution, they actually have students scattered across 4 different time zones. So we use the data that's in the MES system to work out where they are and then set the location accordingly. So it's not always going to be United Kingdom. For the most part it will be, but it could also be scattered. So we can calculate that data as long as we've got some way of knowing where those people are going to be. So in terms of the way that we manage users and groups, it's all fairly straightforward stuff. There's nothing that's particularly complicated in there. Most of this stuff could be done, or can be done manually. The purpose of the Active Directory solution that we provide is to automate some of these things and make the mundane processes that people go through every day a little bit easier. So that's the Office 365 Admin Center. I'll have a quick look at School Data Sync, which is the new solution which went generally available from Microsoft a few weeks ago. Excuse me, which is tied to Microsoft Classroom and also ultimately further down the line other products as well. School Data Sync, for those that don't know, is a new piece of software being provided by Microsoft, which essentially extends the available data in Azure Active Directory and allows you to store school-based information in there, such as the years that students are in, whether they are a teacher or a student, and the information around their classes, so we can determine what classes students and staff are associated with. Now, at the moment, none of this data is in a standard Active Directory. There's not really anywhere to put this information. In an Azure Active Directory, there was even less options for this. The way School Data Sync works, underneath it extends the attributes that are available to Azure Active Directory, and then with the process of this sync process, what it allows you to do is send data from your MIS system up into the cloud, into School Data Sync, and populate those values underneath the users and underneath the groups, which then allows you to work with classrooms based on particular years and things like that. But also, and more importantly, so I think at this stage, allows for other companies to integrate with your data without having to build a complicated connector into your information system. So the company we've been working with mostly on this has been Teacher Dashboard 365, and their process. They've got an Office 365 application which doesn't talk to your local SIMS box or your CMIS box or your Progresso APIs and so on. It talks to School Data Sync and can actually read the information that it requires directly from there. So it's not having to build a complicated connector that then goes to your system. All you need to do is provide the information from your MIS system up into School Data Sync. Now, at the moment, in the UK, the only way of doing that is via CSV files, which are manually uploaded from a server or a desktop and exported manually from your MIS system. One of the things as a company we're working on is a tool that will allow you to automate that process from many of the MIS systems in the UK, which will be a utility that will allow you to extract the data in the format required for SDS and then send that data automatically up into the cloud. We're hoping that's going to be available for release by the beginning of April. And once it is released, it'll be released be available on the SDS Microsoft's website, as well as our website and a few others. Once we've got more information around that, we'll start publishing that on our blog and so on. We have the application written. We're working with the SDS team in the US to make some adjustments. There are some issues that we found in their code related to what we're doing, and there's some issues that they found with the stuff we're doing, and we're just trying to bring our heads together and make sure that what we're doing works for both parties, both for us and for them. So hopefully by the end, well, certainly within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have a pilotable version that we'll be talking to schools about using, and the plan is by the 1st of April to have that released as a piece of software that schools can use. The most important piece of information there is that application will be free. It will be available at no cost to anybody in the UK who wants to use that. Excuse me. So School Data Sync is currently is quite a young product. It's only been generally available as a as a solution from Microsoft for about 3 weeks now, but is going to be an integral part of what Microsoft are planning in the education space. The other interesting piece of news from Microsoft, which I can't actually show you at the moment, unfortunately I don't have a demo of it yet, is Intune for Education. Now, for those of you that are aware, Intune has been around for a few years now in the business and corporate space, which is all around device management and those kind of things. But there hasn't been an education-centric version yet. That was announced a few weeks ago, and I saw a full demo of it last week, and it looks like it's going to be a good piece of software. So once we've got access to that, to play with it properly, we'll make demos available for people, and people can start looking at what Intune for Education can do for them. That will also tie into the data that's stored in Azure Active Directory from School Data Sync, which will allow you then to take data and build carts or groups based on things like the year that students are in or what classes they're in, and use that data then in Intune for Education, which may be of some use to people looking to manage their new devices. As I say, once we've got a real demo I can show people. I was hoping we'd have one today, but unfortunately I've not. We've not yet had our demo tenancy activated with that product as yet. But as soon as we do, I'll be able to give you a run through of how that works. So School Data Sync and Intune for Education, both fairly new things. If anybody wants more information on exactly how those work, I can put something much more detailed together for people. If you want to just send us an email about that, we can certainly do that for you. That's no problem. I don't want to spend too much time on those, because Office 365 is quite a big piece of, it's quite a big platform. There's a lot to go through. So I'll talk a little bit now about Microsoft Classroom. As many of you are aware, there's been a number of assignment tools out on the market for a number of years now, and Google Classroom came to the fold a couple of years back, and has been widely received. It's actually been quite as a good piece of kit. It's a good tool. The uptake for it has been pretty good, and Microsoft have now responded to that with their own version, which is called Microsoft Classroom. As you can tell, imaginatively named, but it does what it says on the tin. It's an assignment tool which is built on top of Office 365 groups. So for those of you that are familiar with Office 365 groups, that was a feature released to Office 365 about 2 years ago, which is different to your standard security and distribution groups insofar as it's actually a much more, it's the right word, it's a bulkier set of groups. It's not actually a single thing. So a security group or a distribution group was a single group with pretty much one purpose. An Office 365 group is actually a culmination of lots of different things. And we can see that actually if we look up here at the top of the page, we've got the assignments, which is Microsoft Classroom. We then have options for calendar, which is built on an Exchange mailbox essentially. Conversations, which is also in Exchange. Class Notebook, which is obviously not that's the OneNote. Files, which is a SharePoint OneDrive. This says SharePoint document library for this site. And underneath this as well, not for some reason not on here, there is also a planner built into these Office 365 groups. So if I go to the calendar for this actually opens Outlook instead of staying in Classroom. And it's quite literally, I've logged on as a user, so I'm actually showing my calendar in there as well. But this is the calendar for that group, for this 2016-7C EN group. But we also have files. If I was to open files, that will take us straight to a document library, now which in this case is being used to store the assignment pieces from Microsoft Classroom, but could also be used to store any other resources you wanted to share with that group. So for those of you who've got Office 365, it's worth having a look at the Office 365 group. They are very different to your standard security and distribution groups. And we're finding that some schools now are beginning to pick these up and run with them. There are some limitations. They're not as customizable as SharePoint sites would be. So if you were looking to use them as somewhere to replace your virtual learning platform, they may not be ready for that just yet. But if you're looking for something that's fairly basic for sharing projects or or smaller pieces of work, then it might be something that's suitable for you. So you also get a new. This is actually a SharePoint site, but it's built on the new SharePoint framework, which is again it's very modern. It's very responsive on the mobile devices, but is not as customizable as a traditional SharePoint site would be. So there's not always. So it's not always suitable for everybody. So it's if I go back to Classroom, I mean, I can show you how this works in a moment, but this is all built on top of Office 365 groups. One of the beauties of doing that is if you already have an Office 365 group, you should be able to turn that into a Classroom fairly easily once you've got Classroom enabled on your tenant. But also once you get this, everything that then integrates with that. So if I was to look at the conversations, I'll let that open. Everything that's all these conversations, these are available in everybody's Outlook app, and allows you then to manage what's going on. Everything that's created as an assignment gets created as an Office 365 appointment, which you can then add to your own calendar, share it with everybody else. So you can add all these things directly to yourself, or you can go straight to the assignment from there. You can also make and reply to comments on here. The comment piece can actually be disabled for students as well, so that some people can respond, some people can't, and you can work out what's going on. But you can actually have conversations around various pieces of work. So as a group of students, you can actually collaborate on this directly from Outlook, as well as obviously talking about it in the classroom, things like that. There we go. If I actually look at an assignment, this is an assignment from almost a month ago, so this is quite overdue. But if I look at the assignment itself, what we've got here is the resource. So this is actually a Word document that's now currently inside this Office 365 group document library, but is then available for others. And what you can actually do is you can manage the assignment and the way that you mark these things as well. So essentially what happens is when you create the assignment, it's sent to all of the users. They can then complete the work, in this case a Word document. They can complete that, send that back, resubmit that, and then once it's been submitted, I mean, these are all overdue, nobody's actually submitted these as yet. Once these have been submitted, you can go through and mark them, either en masse or you can mark them individually. Currently, the marking is all done on a point system, so you can set the maximum number of points and then mark up to that. There are plans to introduce a more grade or point level assignments, but we don't have any firm information on that as yet. Something we're talking with the Classroom team at Microsoft about. The reason it's currently configured as a point system that goes up to 100 is based around the fact that this is not a product for the UK specifically. This is a product that's actually available all over the world, primarily in the US is the initial market, and then out to ourselves, Germany, a few other European countries and further. So everything that they're doing, they've got to consider what's right for them. So we can't, if we were to put our grades in, they're not the same as what's used in the US, and not the same as what's used in Germany and in France and so on. So they've gone with this for now because this is fairly easily translatable. But as I say, that should change, and at some point we'll get that updated. Once you've got everybody marked, so I'm going to give them all, I'm not that cruel, I'm going to give him 70. So you can send that, and once you've actually marked their work, you send it back to the student, and they can make comments on that. You can actually then send him a message talking about what it was like. Yeah, you can comment on their piece of work, and this is then private between you and them as the teacher about what's going on. And once you've done all of that, what you can actually do, once you've got everything marked, you can see very quickly a little graph as to what's going on and where your assignment is at even. Sorry. So in this case, if I look at this one, Again, we've only got one person that's really marked this, but once it's marked, you can see what the kind of spread is. So very quickly you can work out, see where your group is at in terms of that assignment and what's going on there. One of the features that's not yet in here, but we're hoping is going to come out fairly soon, is some wider analytics information. At the moment, it's very difficult to get any kind of overview as to what's going on. The only thing you've got really is to have a look at each assignment and work out where students are. One thing we've asked for is a wider analysis of where students are, what their markings are like, and all those kind of things. So that hopefully that's something that's going to come in future versions. I should say at the moment the Classroom is not currently released as a generally available product. It is still in preview. There are quite a number of changes still on the board, and we're hoping that it's going to be released formally in the next few months. If people have access to Classroom already, obviously you can start using it. It is now fully data compliant, which means that all the data is stored in the EU, which meets all the regulations from the UK government around where data should be stored and how secure it is, which means you can start using this now a little bit more widely than before. It is still in preview though, so there will be changes underneath, and also more likely to the front end. We think this is going to change quite a bit in the next few months, so we'll just have to see where this goes. We have a number of schools that are using it for real and doing real assignments with it now. We've also got a few that are holding off looking at it, but haven't actually gone with it just as yet. We don't have a firm date for the release, but we're hoping it's going to be sometime this summer that this will be available to schools to use as a generally available, a released product out of preview. But once we know more, we can have a look at that. So if I have a look. Again, in fact, while this is loading, this is a class notebook. While this is loading, if you've got any questions around Classroom in general or SDS or any of the stuff we've talked about in here, I mean, either post it in here in the IM for this session, or drop us an email separately, and we can talk through all these kind of things. Equally, if there are any, if you are using Classroom already, or have looked at it at all, if you've got any feedback on things that don't work the way you would like them to work, or any features or anything else you'd like us to add, I say us to add, we don't write the software, but anything you'd like adding or looking at any differently, then let us know what you want around that, and we can feed some of that information directly back into Microsoft. There's also a user voice available for Classroom. Well, for all the education products, but it's primarily for Classroom at the moment, where schools can provide feedback. So there's a couple of different methods, but if you let us know what they are, we're collating feedback from all of our existing customers, and we'll collate feedback from anybody else, and then we'll pass those directly into the Classroom team themselves and let them go what's going on. We've got one question coming around around reminders. So is there any way to turn off reminders I receive from assignments set for individual classes? Not easily, no. What you could do, if I go back to the manage section, the short answer is no to that one, Gareth. As it stands at the moment, all the reminders are automated, and the way that works, this may not work in here, is if you're in the Office 365 group itself, so in Outlook, if you went to, or certainly in Outlook Online, and go to the apps, go into groups, on the right hand side you've got this joined option. You can, you may find that you're subscribed to the group rather than joined to the group. Now if you have a look at that, if you are not subscribed to the group, then you shouldn't get the reminders and everything else inside your group. And you shouldn't get notifications of things, but it's a global thing. You can't just do it for appointments on reminders. It is for the whole group itself. And if you've got more than one group, you might have to do that more often. But that's something I can certainly feed back into them. So 2 more questions. Are you able to lock down files for a group so only teacher can create and edit files? There are some changes in the pipeline around the way that files are managed. But as it stands at the moment, no, not really. There's a little bit. There's something that's actually been fed back a number of times. That at the moment anybody who's a member of the group can do quite a bit with the documents that are in there. So no, but as far as I'm aware, Chris, that's on the pipe. It's on the list of things to do. It's in the pipeline. But again, I'll feed that back to them and let them know. Another question from Louise. This is about: is it possible to push marks from Classroom into an LMS? The short answer at the moment is no. But once Classroom is released, there will be an API available to third-party developers such as ourselves and available to the LMSs, so that they could potentially pick up information from Classroom. So Classroom itself will never push data into an LMS. This is a Microsoft tool. They're never going to write software that will push into SIMS or ISAMs or any other systems. But what they may be able to do is give access for those companies to integrate with Classroom, but it's not something that's currently possible. However, on that note, if we look at class notebooks, now I don't actually have the full client available on this machine, but what you can do, if you're using class notebooks and doing assignments with class notebooks, there are some LMSs that you can write back into directly from class notebooks. So that's something that may be worth investigating, but currently not from Classroom. So this is class notebooks. Again, I was going to say it's a new feature. It's not really that new because it's been around for 18 months to 2 years now. Excuse me, in some guides anyway. So class notebooks is a feature from Microsoft, which is designed to essentially create a OneNote document, but based around classes. So it's not a standard OneNote document. And the main differences are we actually have 4 different sections in these OneNotes, which is a collaboration space, and this is available. And so I should say I'm currently logged in as a teacher, so you can see what's going on. I'll show you how it looks as a student. It's a little bit different. There is a collaboration space, and every one of these notebooks gets this. And this is a page that everyone can see. This is everyone that's a member of the group. We also then have a content library, which is a place for sharing material. So the collaboration space is a page that can be edited by everyone. So this is so everybody, the teachers and the students, can work inside this space, and it's designed for people to collaborate. So if there's a bigger project that the whole class is taking on, this is the area that they would use to do that. Content library is a read-only thing, as far as the students are concerned. The teachers can add documents into here, add resources into here that the students can then use, but they cannot modify them, they can't change them, they can't delete them, they can't add new ones. There is a teacher-only section, which, as the name suggests, is only for teachers. All the teachers in the group can see and use this, but none of the students can get to this at all. They just can't see it. So this is a good place for for teachers to store more private notes around the group. Just things like any kind of lesson plans that they're not ready to release to the students yet, or plans for upcoming projects and things like that. What's most interesting, I'll use Chris because I know that he's actually associated with this group, is each student has their own section. So when I show you this logged on as a student, what you'll see is only the student can only see their piece of their section. So as a teacher, I'm logged in now and I can see every single one of my students in this class. And I can see all of their sections and all of their work. So if there's these sections here, quizzes, assignments, class notes, handouts, are customizable. Those something we've created. And through Salamander Active Directory, we can specify exactly what those are going to be, and create those in advance fairly easily. And what happens is every time a new student is added, they get a section in this group, in this OneNote, automatically added for them. It's permission, so only they can see it, only they can get to it, along with their teacher. So we can have a look at the ones, because now these are empty. They haven't used these as yet. But But essentially what these are about, this is so that the teacher and the student can share work between each other, but it's still a private forum, so they're not having to go and hand their books in at the end of the week or the end of the day or whatever it is. They can do their work. It shows up in OneNote, and because it's already there, the teacher can automatically see what's going on. There is also inside the OneNote app, inside the OneNote Rich client, as it were, the client for Windows. There's a couple of things that are of interest to people, which we can demo separately if people are interested to look at them. Which is the learning tools, which is a collection of tools inside Class Notebook, which are designed to aid the learning. So if I look at, I'll find the link and I'll send these to people. So there's what these are is a collection of a few different things that make it easier for people to read and write. So what we have is the most important one, if I can find a demo of it. Yes, is a feature called the Immersive Reader, which is designed, was designed primarily as part of a hackathon last year, 2015, which allows a OneNote document to be expanded and read. It's read out loud by the application, and it's read in a kind of full screen manner. And what this allows you to do is pick out all the relevant bits. So you can pick out all the nouns, all the verbs, all the adjectives, and they get highlighted. You can change the size of the text. You can change the speed that the text is read out to you. And this is designed as a tool to aid the learning, primarily for those users who are struggling with the words. So this could be younger students, Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2, who are learning these for the first time, or it could be students with learning difficulties, maybe dyslexia and things like that, something that's very key. And it helps, it's another way of students being able to absorb this information, absorb this data without the pain of having to read through it. They can actually work through this in the immersive read. It will be read to them at a pace that's comfortable for them, but it will also highlight all the relevant words, so they can learn about adjectives and verbs and nouns and all those kind of things, and they can learn through that. There's also a dictation tool built into the learning tools as well, which is designed to allow students to dictate their work directly into OneNote. So not just for reading, but those students who might struggle with writing their work can also use the learning tools to dictate directly into their class notebooks. So that's something that may be of interest for a number of schools. The other thing that would be of interest is a class notebook add-in, which is an add-in for the Office. Oh, that's not the right one. I've gone to the wrong one. Okay, there we go. It's not actually going to let me do it. There's an add-in for class notebooks in the client itself, and that will allow you to do various things, one of which is connect to systems such as Microsoft Classroom and take assignments from OneNote, actually assign work to students inside OneNote itself, and then use that as the assignment tool and pass those marks back up into class notebooks. There's also various other LMSs that works for. Teacher Dashboard 365 is one of those. So you can connect your class notebooks from your client installed on your desktops up to your assignments inside Teacher Dashboard 365 and manage all those that work through there. If you're logged on as a teacher, you can also do some extra pieces of work. You can actually distribute work to students. If you've got a particular page or a particular section that you want everybody to have access to, you could make it available in the content library or the collaboration space so they can get to it. But you could also distribute that directly to every student's section so that they've got if you're building a template for them to do a piece of project work on, you can actually distribute that directly to them through the free add-in that's available from Microsoft for the class notebooks. For that to work, you'll need Outlook 2016 for Windows. Won't currently work on the Mac version, although I believe there are plans to develop for that. So the class notebooks are, again, something we could spend a very long time talking about, but I'm conscious I don't want to dwell on it today. But there are lots and lots of very clever things around that that are definitely going to be worth people taking a bit of a look at. Just as a quick glance, this is now a student view, and I can see here that I've got access to the collaboration space. I've got the content library, which I'm not allowed to change. I can't do anything in there. And I also have my work. I don't have access to any of the other pieces of work. For any other student, all I can see is my own stuff. So that's the class notebooks. The only other bits I want to show you, and then I'll leave it open to questions. I've noticed we're 36 minutes in already. So what I'll show you quickly is some of the features we can do around the more basic stuff around Office 365. So we talked a little bit about Classroom, class notebooks. The Azure AD Connect stuff is the very first stuff we started with. Licensing. The other stuff I'll spend a couple of moments on is timetable synchronization from your MIS. Now, this isn't something that's exclusive to Office 365 because we can do this with local exchanges. We can also do it with Google Apps, which is something that we'll talk about in the webinar next week. What we can do is we can take the timetable directly out of their MIS, be that Sims or iSAMS, Bromcom, Progresso, and so on and so forth, and populate that directly into the user's individual calendar. So this is logged on as a teacher, and this is actually last month. This is an old event now, but on the 7th of Feb, those are the dates and times. That's where it's generated from, and then obviously we've got these. Now these are pulled by our application from the MIS directly, and then pushed into Exchange, and we can do the same for students. And this is actually today's. This is Chris's calendar for today, and so at a glance they can very quickly see where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. These events are also categorized, and I've just tried to move that as well. I've moved that, and now I've moved that. Next time the application runs, it will actually put it back again, because it knows where it should be and put it back. Now these are all categorized. Now this is a category called Science. We generally don't color the categories because the colors on categories are actually at a per mailbox level. Each user can specify their own colors, their own categories. So you can set the categories, but once we've got the category set, if he was to then change the color of that, it would then change all of his science ones to be that color. And every time this runs, every time our application runs, it checks all of these events and will make sure that they're in the right place. And in that case, I've just moved that one by accident. And what our application would do next time it runs is put that back to where it should be. If somebody was to delete one of these events, it will recreate new ones. What's most important to note here is that these events are managed very separately to any events created by the user themselves. So if a user was to create other events, whether they clashed with these or whether they had the same name as these or anything like that, it wouldn't matter. Those events would remain exactly as they were. They would be untouched. They would not get deleted. Only the ones that we are provisioning are the ones that we process. And we do that by using the internal IDs of the appointments themselves to determine which ones are which. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions around timetables. Will this tool be able to pick up cover from iSAMS to a teacher calendar? I need to check whether we can do it with iSAMS, but the short answer is probably yes. We're doing that with Sims and a couple of other processes currently. And the way that works is we pull the cover information and then send that through. I can certainly look at whether we can do that with iSAMS or not. In fact, I shall write that down. And then if you want to get in touch, we can certainly look at that and make that a possibility. Another question was, do timetable events automatically not have reminder alerts? Yes, is the short answer to that one. We automatically create them without reminders, although we can add reminders should schools want them. We have a number of schools that want to add like a 5-minute reminder to every event. We could also add reminders to particular types of events. So if we were dealing with cover, going back to the previous question, if we were looking at cover, we could add reminders to the cover events, but not to the standard events. So all of that's completely customizable, but generally no, we wouldn't add reminders to all of these, especially because we're talking about probably 5 or 6 events a day. People don't really want their phones or emails going off that regularly. Another question, can it create and import events into separate calendars? Yes, it could. So what we can do, normally we use the default calendar for that student or teacher, but we could create a sub calendar or another calendar inside their mailbox, and then use that for all of their events. Yes, and we could do that. Could be a separate one for cover and their standard timetable and so on. We've got a number of schools who leave the standard calendar alone and then have us use a separate calendar, maybe called timetable, for their normal events, and a separate calendar called cover for their other events. The other question that gets asked quite a bit is whether we can pull data from the staff diary from Sims and from other systems, and again the answer to that is probably yes. We certainly can do it for Sims. Whether we can do it for other systems would depend on how available that data is to us from the other systems. But in theory, we could put the staff diary into these events as well, or we could put the staff diary into a shared mailbox. Another question, could it create an exam calendar? Yes, in theory. It largely depends where the data is. But if you're using Sims, for instance, we could take the exam information from Sims, and we could turn that into exam calendars that are populated either into their standard calendar in Exchange or in Outlook, or create a separate one called exam or something like that. Okay, another question. Some of our teachers use these events as lesson planner. Would they get overwritten each time the script was run? We'd want to keep them as a history. Okay, so the only time it would overwrite an event is if the event moved in the MIS system, or if the event was moved inside Outlook by the user. So if the user was, if the event was left alone, then generally no, we wouldn't move those around. However, what we could do, which may be of use, if I look at the description at the moment, this is just essentially generated from the name of the subject, the code, and then that. What we could do is we could potentially link that directly to class notebooks. If you were using class notebooks, in fact, I know we do this for a few schools. We have a number of schools that use class notebooks for managing all their lesson plans and things like that in the teacher-only space. And we can actually link those events directly to the class notebook that's relevant for that class, so that rather than having to keep them separately and manage them directly through Outlook or anywhere else, you could manage them all in one place in your class notebooks, and then just link to that very quickly from your calendar. And then the same for students. We could actually add a link in the event for the student as well, so that they could very quickly just click on that and go straight to the relevant place, be that the Office 365 group or the class notebook, depending what it is you wanted to use. I think we've got another couple of questions coming in, so I'll just wait for those to come in. Does this option work for some teachers and not others if wanted? Yes, we can customize. I assume by that you mean which teachers get the sync of the calendars. If so, yes, we can define that by anything we want, really. We could pick a number of teachers by any method, really. We can just pick them out of the air, or we can do it by teachers that teach a particular subject or a particular year or something like that. So yes, we can customize all of this to determine which bits people see and which bits don't. The only other thing I wanted to show people is not just while I'm thinking about Office 365 in general, is a little piece around SharePoint. Now this is all, so everything I've shown you so far can be done with Salamander Active Directory. So that's one of our, well, in fact, our probably our biggest product at the moment. The sister product to that is Salamander SharePoint, which is designed specifically to talk and manage with SharePoint. I'm not going to spend a long time on this. Darren spoke about this a couple of weeks ago in a webinar that we did around teaching and learning with Salamander SharePoint. There's another one of those in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. But some of the stuff we can do, again, this is in an Office 365 tenant, so we can manage stuff in there. So if I was to open, let's open a couple of these up. Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of things we're doing in here now with SharePoint is we're managing SharePoint class sites and subject sites. So this is a class site. So it's underneath, in essence, it's a fairly standard SharePoint site. Most of the things we're adding are fairly standard stuff. So we've got a document library based around collaboration, one for storing videos. Now this can actually link out to the video portal, which is a fairly new feature in Office 365, which we've not really talked about as yet. We also have a student Dropbox, which is it's a document library with a folder per student, and the student can drop their work into that, but only the student and the teacher can see that. You can't. I'm logged in as the administrator, so I can see everybody. But if I was logged in as a student, I'd only be able to see my work and be able to drop my work in there. So similarly to the way that the sections inside the class notebook works, but this is designed to store files and folders. So it's another way of students and staff sharing their work. We can also link out directly to a class notebook as well, and also things like calendars and share resources. Now, if I look at, this is the French site, and this is designed to be a more of a resource-based environment. So it's less of it's not a class-specific stuff. This is something that's designed for everybody who takes or teaches French to be able to share and collaborate with resources and things like that. So this is your potentially the shelf in the French office where you keep all the textbooks. Actually store that information directly in SharePoint, and then it's available to everybody. It's not something that every school wants to use, and I mean, Darren's on the call, and I'm going to be in trouble because I've not talked about it for long enough. But there's a lot more to what Salamander SharePoint can do than this. There's another couple of webinars that you can do that we've got around that will talk about this in far more detail. Would it be possible to give each student a OneNote notebook, e.g. an electronic version of a student planner? I suspect yes. I think we'd need to talk in a little bit more detail about exactly what the requirements around that would be. But it would be possible to create a OneNote for every student. We could use that. We could base that on a template, which maybe had every week in it or something like that. So in theory, yes, we'd need to talk a little bit more detail about exactly what is out there. What currently is quite difficult in developer terms is all this info is. So if I go back to class notebooks, what's quite difficult in developer terms at the moment is the ability to push information into the pages or into the sections of these OneNotes. Currently, as developers, we've got access to create the sections themselves, but not really that much around the actual around creating pages or adding content to these. Now that's something that I was at Microsoft last week, and one of the things that we talked about there was the ability to push data directly into these events, directly into here, and actually update the pages and add content to these pages, not just add blank pages and with the right names. That's something we should have hopefully by April or May, which will extend our the possibilities of what we can do around this stuff quite extensively. So in theory, we could be able to do that. But yes, in order to answer the question itself, yes, we could create a student. We could create a single OneNote for every single individual student, and potentially populate that with information based either on a template, which is something we could probably do now. We could copy the pages or sections from a template file, or further down the line, we may actually be able to dynamically add the content